but welcome to the Career Coffee series. This was started several years ago as an attempt to bring people together to talk about their career. I found out as I go through my career, there's always questions I wanted to ask, but I didn't know who to ask. And I needed kind of a safe space, as Clark says, a brave space to ask questions and to explore different career options. So the purpose of the Career Coffee is for folks to come together and get some ideas and to share and discuss and kind of support each other in our career paths. Today we're talking about portfolio careers, and many people are saying, what's a portfolio career? And I kind of define it as a way of putting together pieces that make you happy in your career. You find fulfillment, bring different skills together. So in my career, I'm Eva Kaiser, hello. I used to be in agency life. I liked agency life. I love the fast pace of it, but I also wanted other things to do and flexibility that came from being an independent. So I became an independent, and that's part of my portfolio career. But I also have, as part of my portfolio career, teaching and doing volunteer work with PRSA. Besides hosting this, I'm also the chair of the Midwest District. So part of my portfolio career is devoting time to PRSA. There's other volunteer works I do in my community, and it also gives me flexibility to be able to take care of my parents who are older and to take care of my kids who are in high school. So my portfolio career fits my lifestyle and it gives me pleasure in all the different areas. The best thing about this is I'm not working for somebody else, I'm working for myself, and I get to pick what makes me happy and do those things that I enjoy, but still to pursue a career that I enjoy. So we have two people on the call today as our speakers or our leaders here. One is Clark Sanders, and I met Clark when I was doing some research to find someone who networks really well to speak. And Clark came up as someone who really networks really well, and she's exciting and enthusiastic, and plus she's not old like a lot of us. She's in her 20s. You're young. You're the youngster here.
I'm a baby. I have to remember that. I am an infant in this world. Yes.
And I want to showcase that you could have a portfolio career and not have to be, older in your career. You can start it off soon, right away, and encourage people to find their passion in what they're doing. So Clark began her journey as a creative entrepreneur after some time in corporate and agency world as a marketing specialist. She quickly discovered her talents, passions, and even a mission all aligned behind the camera. So she kind of pursues photography, but as her own independent and other things as well. She's very involved in fashion and fashion shows in town and art. So she kind of brings it all together to make her fulfillment and her passion. The other person is Kelly Grayler, who I've known for a long time. She's been active in PRSA, I think, since maybe 92.
I joined my PRSSA chapter in 1990.
So I gave you 2 years younger than what you thought you were. But
thanks.
So Kelly's been very active in PRSA, but she's also kind of found her way in creating a portfolio career. And she's the first one who gave the term to me to use, kind of pulling her passions together and pursuing things that she finds lively for herself and brings things together. And she's encouraging everyone to do the same. She's a strategist, founder, and advocate who works with intersections of technology, innovation, and social impact. She's been a strategic advisor of the C-level leadership teams for some of the world's largest brands. And she's also co-founder and CEO of Alice Riot, a fine art licensing and consulting agency that connects products, brands, and experiences. She also has created a new, a content series called WTAF, Women, Travel, Art, and Food. And she serves has been president of Minnesota PRSA, but she's also serves on the board of the Goldstein Museum of Design at the University of Minnesota. She's got a lot of things going on, and it kind of amplifies being a portfolio career. With that, I wanted to just kind of have each of them prompt and jump in and tell me how you define a portfolio career and what does it look like for you besides what I just said it was. Okay, start with Clark.
Yeah, all right. Oh my goodness, I'm super excited to be here. A portfolio career, at least for me, this was my first time calling it something like this, hearing that. And I was like, I love that definition. I just always considered myself a multifaceted freelancer who just couldn't settle on a place that she liked to work. So I worked in corporate, as Eva had mentioned, and I did work on the small agency side and got to wear all the hats, which I really enjoyed. And I realized I wasn't centering the folks that I really wanted to center and serve, which is Black, Indigenous, and people of color, business owners, artists, creatives. I knew so many folks that just didn't necessarily have the marketing resources or the experience behind a lot of the stuff that I thought was just common knowledge at this point, because I'm around so many amazing people who also speak that language, that they were looking for support. And so I now go around supporting other creatives and businesses and organizations, nonprofits. And like Eva had mentioned, I love being my own boss. I mean, for me, love y'all. I got my coffee, but I usually don't start my day till 11. So I am 11 to like midnight kind of worker. I love a second shift. Yeah. Yeah, I think like quickly in a nutshell, that's how I explain mine. I get to, and for me, I'm a lifelong learner. I've mentioned this a million times. My father's a teacher and my mother works helping people find jobs. And so for me, I just always am looking for another opportunity or a new way to learn. And I found this was just such an amazing way for me to get my hands on 12 million projects at one time.
Well, so I there's no way I could start my day at 11. I've been doing this for way too long. I have too many partners who are overseas who have like ridiculous meetings at 4 a.m, and I still will hop out if I need to for those. But it's interesting you talk about coffee. It's my last remaining vice. I have no vices left. I kind of miss my vices, but coffee's the last one I've got, but I also know myself well enough to know I've got to stop at noon. If I go past noon, it is going to be a bad evening and I will not be able to sleep. Yep. So,
I feel you there.
Yeah. You know, it's taken me a long time to get really comfortable with the self-awareness of how I'm really wired and how I can use the things that I have been told traditionally, including in performance reviews over my career, were problems I needed to address that were in fact my strengths, and to be very comfortable in saying, you know, actually, this is what I'm good at. And to, so one of the things that I've finally, after, and I've known this my whole life, I'm a misfit. I like breaking things. I like change. I like new stuff. And, those really, what I discovered, 22 years, I spent the first decade in the agency world. Then I moved over to corporate. I was at Best Buy for nearly 10 years and then made a leapfrog into the energy sector and was at Berkshire Hathaway Energy, which is owned by Mr. Buffett and is a very well-oiled machine. And what I discovered getting to the top was I was not being rewarded or encouraged to do the things that I was naturally good at. And what I really discovered is as I stayed longer and longer, that the career path, the traditional laid out in front of you, set your long-term goals, here's your performance review, doing those things, I don't fit in that system very well. And so, there was a phrase, there's a woman I met years ago, actually she's in the Twin Cities, she just retired from Ecolab, Carrie Bjorhus. And I remember her making a comment about getting to a certain level and you're rewarded for polishing a ball. If I have to sit and polish a ball every day, I will go insane. And so I didn't step out of corporate intentionally in that I thought I was leaving for good. I just was like, I'm going to resign from this gig, move my family back to the Twin Cities, and I'll get back into a corporate job. I just still have not done it. It's almost like something broke in me in a good way, where suddenly I was looking very differently at corporations. I was looking at different jobs, and I found my filter was much stronger than it had ever been before. Because if you think about what we do at the end of the day, we're advocates for our brands, our companies, our employers, for communities we work with, whomever it is. I mean, that's what we do. We are advocates and the storytellers that bring others along. And I just found that I was catching myself saying, I don't believe in your mission. I don't like your products. I don't like how you operate in a community. I don't like your leaders. So I was suddenly very, very picky about who I said yes to. Luckily for me, when I made that step out in 2015, I didn't have to do much in terms of putting myself out there as a consultant. I was on referral, and I am to this day. And I'm very, very fortunate to have a good network where that was possible, where the work that, you know, the bread and butter, so to speak, comes to me on consulting. And what I've also discovered is it gives me a lot of time to go and do those sandbox things that I like to do, trying things, breaking stuff, falling down, learning from it. I had the opportunity in 2016 through 2019 to work with a couple of different startup accelerator programs. So tangentially through Cargill, I was working with Techstars on their Farm to Fork Accelerator, and then more directly with a group here in town called the Sprosty Network, which are a bunch of old Best Buy executives who started their own retail consulting firm. And we launched a startup accelerator for startups looking to scale into retail. And I fell in love. I fell in love with that whole notion of being entrepreneurial and how failure can be embraced and being different and awkward can be embraced. And so that's how I spend my time these days. I just took a startup and completely turned it on its ear 4 months ago. And that's part of the startup curve that I've been enjoying. But you know, it's funny because, you know, if you talked to me 15 years ago, I was very concerned about my title. I was very concerned about my Arthur Page membership. I was very concerned about showing up well with the executives and continuing to grow in this space. There are great people out there who can do those jobs. It's just not for me.
Right. So what is your current, Kelly, what does your current portfolio career entail? So what are all things you're doing? You're doing consulting. What else are you doing?
So I have two businesses. The first one is literally when I got in touch with LegalZoom and said, I've got to set up an LLC because I'm now consulting. This was in 2015. So Grayler LLC is my consulting business. I'm going to go on the record and say it's the absolute worst branding exercise in history because I spelled the business name Grayler, thinking that would help people with pronouncing my last name. Epic failure all the time. This is Kelly Growler from Grayler LLC. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. There's a reason why I'm not in the room with the creatives. And so I've had just a blast with that side of the business. Have worked with Medtronic, did some really terrific work with Cargill on their ag tech strategy, working with their CIO and now their chief data officer. More recently, I started working with Self-Esteem Brands. They're the parent company that owns Anytime Fitness. And that started as a 30-day crisis engagement and it's extended into an interim role while as they continue to grow and are looking at formally building out functions like public relations, communications, et cetera. So I'm helping to bridge on that for them. So that's the Grayler LLC side. Alice Riot started off as a clothing business. We were making apparel. And we did it with the purpose to help more women invest in women artists. What we learned about ourselves going through that is that there are plenty of other great people out there who are makers of products. We don't have to be the makers because we're not that hot at it. We make great products. I know how to do sourcing. I understand how the supply chain works, but that's not where again, I'm an advocate. So we brought Alice Riot back to the things that my co-founder, Kate Iverson, and I are good at, which is being advocates for artists. And it was the right move to make. I'm, still getting rid of some old inventory, but we just had an announcement yesterday that we're helping the world's largest professional association for women in the art world do their first drop of a non-fungible token on the metaverse as a way to start testing out fundraising for their association and through their members in a different way. And it's a way, so that's a great example of how we are helping an organization, an artist, a brand move and guide them through this space in terms of what are some really awesome experiences that someone can have with art outside of a gallery or a museum or an auction house. And how does that come to life through a brand? And how can you have an experience with art on a product from a brand as a consumer? And there's a physical experience and increasingly what's the digital experience? What is the metaverse experience? How are we going to experience these brands in the virtual world as well as the physical world? this is all reminding me of what it was like in 2006 when I was at Best Buy, and we had these things all of a sudden called Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, and we were all looking at them going, what do we do with this? Is this serious? Is this a fad? Should we ignore it? And in that case, and at Best Buy, our point of view was, well, the average age of our employee is 24 years old in the store, and we sell the technology that makes it possible. We probably need to show up and be active in this space. I think brands are doing the same thing right now in terms of meta. What is the right way to show up? And we think that by connecting to a brand's social impact goals and bringing women artists who are horribly underrepresented in the fine art world, we think all boats can rise on that. So that's my portfolio right now. And it does, even you had brought up, aging parents and whatnot. I lost my mother last year. She had a very difficult 6 years. And I think that the fact that I could be so flexible and dictate my own time and energy made it possible for me to be, her power of attorney and help manage, through the end of her life and now deal with her estate.
I'm sorry for that, Kelly. So Clark, you've mentioned you're a photographer, but you also mentioned to me earlier that you couldn't do anything in February because that was your busy month. So what does your portfolio career have in it?
Yes. So since I'm centering mostly people of color-owned businesses and creatives, right now I'm flooded with tons of websites as folks are ready to, like, as Kelly was even mentioning, like, artists are starting to really get involved in digital spaces. So I'm working with some incredible artists on developing their portfolios currently, so they have an online space to present themselves. I've worked with an organization called Midwest Mixed for quite some time now, and it's a space dedicated to identity, mostly through race, but also other ways of the world. There's a lot of space for queerness, sexual identity, those types of things. But through Midwest Mix, we hosted our very first online conference last year. It was completely digital. None of us had any experience. Most of the people involved are either nonprofit organizers that are just always trying to scrape the barrel and find some funds to make some great community activation happen. And I was fortunate enough to jump in and say, hey, I've attended a lot of digital conferences. Like, I'm willing to give it a shot if you are. So we all jumped in together and brought something amazing to life. We ended up selling out our, I think it was 600 seat attendance, and we had people from around the world that were interested in joining the conversation, and it was just absolutely incredible. And what was wonderful is we got to have this, like Eva had mentioned, a brave space for people to really step in, be authentically themselves, ask some of those more uncomfortable questions or maybe more intimate questions surrounding career, personal life, identity, whatever it spanned. But it was just a space to be held accountable and listened to, because we don't necessarily get those spaces all the time, even when we try to create them for ourselves. So also, sorry, everybody, I've got a sick puppy, so he keeps wandering back and forth.
All right.
Yeah, so I'm like, we all kind of get the gist of the working from home. We love it, right? So currently in my career, I'm also working with an organization called Neighborship Mortgage, and they're doing something that I had no idea even existed, which was dedicating space to folks, marginalized folks, primarily people of color, but people with poor credit scores in the mortgage industry. A lot of people that maybe didn't even know they could own a home, undocumented citizens even, they're able to own properties and do these things. It's just, since unfortunately the mortgage industry is so focused on making money and numbers, that it takes extra steps and some extra intimate time to work with these folks, and therefore not a lot of space is made. And so I'm able to work with some really incredible organizations like that, who are truly being advocates and initiates in their communities to bring this cool stuff to life. And then on the fashion side, as Eva had mentioned, it's spring. Spring fashion is coming. It's coming right up here, right at the end of April. And so I'm working with a bunch of incredible designers, artists, and producers to make sure we can capture and even reach the community with some of these incredible events coming up. So that's kind of been the gist of my career right now. Then lots of campaigns as well. So specific to a product launch or community initiatives. I like to jump from project to project. I learned pretty quickly my attention span can be a little short, so I'm less of a manager, more of a developer.
That reminds me of my career path, and I went to school for advertising, but it seemed kind of cut and dry. And then I fell into PR, and I'm like, what's this? I get to do all these different things. I get to do this, this, and this. And I think for me, right now, my space, I get to do things that make me happy and try new things. And like the other day, I had to do a flyer for my son's team. I'm like, okay, let me think about my graphic design background. What can I do here? And just the idea to be able to, it doesn't look very great, but I was very happy with it because it was supposed to be lacrosse, and I made the fork and the spoon. I felt very proud of that.
It's great.
I think for me though, my career path has made me do things like I want to try new things, do things that make me happy, get down and get dirty, or consult. It's just the things that make your life full. But that comes really from being my own boss.
Mhm.
I know, Clark, you started out your career working for other people, but you made the jump really early in your career to be your own boss. What prompted that?
Yeah, so I've been told this by a lot of folks, and it was such a huge compliment from Kelly. She's like, "Wow, you have such great self-awareness." I guess I've always kind of just been self-aware, and whenever I'm not comfortable in a situation, I'm like, "There's 1,012 other ones I can jump into." So let me try to.
That has to be generational. That has got to be generational.
It must be. I'm more comfortable being uncomfortable at this point. So if I could give a class on it, I would, but I honestly don't know where it comes from. I always joke that I was made for this career. Once I had discovered like, oh, I could do this and just like hustle it out and kind of figure it out and make connections on my own. That sounds incredible. But I was working for a small agency in the Southwest Twin Cities that I just had an incredible boss. I was very fortunate. I actually had decided, I hadn't shared this with y'all, but I had decided that the morning I had just a coffee with her, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go out and freelance on my own. I can make some money doing some graphic design work. I'm a good photographer. I know I can go do this. And I sat down, her name is Kelly Grady. She's fantastic. We had our coffee and I said, there's something I'm going to learn from this woman and I just really need to work with her. And she even said, I don't have a job for you yet, but I'm hiring you. So I'm going to go talk to my boss. So she ended up coming back with a job offer like 3 days later. And I sat there and I was like, you know what? All right, let me take this job. Let me see what I can learn. Because I initially wanted to start and own my own agency, my own marketing and advertising agency, which I had started. And over this past couple of years, I actually decided to sunset, which was like a whole other journey in itself. But they always were knowledgeable of the fact that I had my own side passions. Since we were a small, mighty team of 7, we all got it, that we had stuff going on, and we even supported each other whatever ways that we could. And I was doing some photography with the city of Minneapolis for a couple of days of an event. And so I had to take work off, and I took a day off. Everybody knew. And I came back the next day and Kelly had called me into her office and I thought I was in trouble. I was like, oh my gosh, I dropped the ball on something. So I go in there, I was like, what's going on? What's up? And she looks up from her desk and she goes, how long do I have until you leave? And it was the first time someone had arguably, and the way that I even look at it is almost like gave me permission to go out and pursue it. And I was like, what do you mean? And she goes, you just went a whole couple of days of being your own boss, running on your own time, doing things that fuel you. So how long do I have you on my team? And so that day I sat down with her and crafted up my notice. I was fortunate enough to be able to stay on the team as a contractor, as then I moved into my other world of work of them working for myself. But I have a very, very lucky story that I'm just this self-aware chick that everything just keeps kind of aligning for me in cool ways. And I'm just going to keep taking it.
Well, I think one of the things that's exciting, because one of the things that stuck with me when we spoke earlier this week was when Kelly said that she decided to take responsibility for her career, and go beyond what she thought her career should be dictated from what she thought in the past. I don't think I explained that right, but Kelly, the idea of taking responsibility for your career, could you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah. So, it's funny because there are certain things that I think being inside a company, they provide and they keep you comfortable, right? A guaranteed paycheck deposited every 2 weeks, health insurance, options, and sometimes you don't actually get those options because they're underwater when you leave. True story. And you can look at those, and for some people, I think that they're absolutely right for them. Absolutely. The systems that we have in place are right for certain types of people. I felt liberated when I finally stepped out and took full responsibility for all of those elements myself. And it's not easy. I think that the one thing I want to just say is stepping off of like the corporate ladder and stepping into your own space can be terrifying. And you go through a whole lot of emotions in terms of what that feels like. I mean, my first year, I had a lot of imposter syndrome going on, really beating myself up saying, well, if I'm stepping off the corporate ladder now, am I ever going to be able to get back on it? Do people think that I'm not good enough? I wasn't good enough to be a C-level executive. I was great at it, down in, with Berkshire Hathaway. I was fantastic at it. I just didn't like it. And I think that, there were executive coach conversations. I entered, there's a program here in the Twin Cities that I strongly recommend if someone can afford to do it. It's called Studio E. And it's a program founded by Nate Garvis, who's a former executive at Target, and then has his own consulting, more public affairs consulting business called Naked Civics. And then Tom Weiss, who is an attorney, launched this program, and it's all about developing an explorer mindset. That idea that there's the known world, and they really base a lot of their principles on the Shackleton experience in Antarctica. That idea that you're comfortable in the known world. What's expected of you. It's called Studio E. So the letter E. Yep. And what they do is they take a year, at least when I went through the program, it was a year-long program where they push you out into the unknown. How do you, just with the means that you already have, start doing something that you want to do? But they focused first on really, what is your statement of truth? What is it, what is the thing that defines you? And what I found out going through that experience is I want to be the pilot of my own journey. I want to experience life on my terms, not on someone else's terms. And when you do that and you get that level of self-awareness of what works right, what works for you, then it's easier to endure, all the DIY, if you will, that comes with running your own thing. I'm finally now growing at a point where I can bring on other people to be a part of the work that I'm doing. But for the first few years, it was everything from the invoices to the bookkeeper to, the tax advisor. I've always loved working with attorneys. I always thought they were our partners in crime, if you will, inside companies. So working with attorneys in very different ways. Gosh, I've had moments where I'm like, I remember when I was at Best Buy bitching about the fact that our budget was only $9 million. Oh, do you know what I could do with $9 million right now? Oh, I could do so much with $9 million. So I think it's a trade-off, Eva, in terms of, what's right for you. And for me, I call them the golden handcuffs now. I'm not ready to go back in and put on the golden handcuffs and be a part of that of someone else's system. I want to build my own and see what I can do.
You got a lot of nodding there from Clark. Do you want to jump in here for this?
No, after this, I know Kelly and I will have to connect again, but I'm sitting here, I'm like, you're taking all the words out of my mouth. The golden handcuffs was something I was going to bring up too, is, I worked at Target on their social media team right out of college, and the resources, oh my gosh, I drool over thinking about them now, and how I sat right next to the PR on my team. And so we were able to know the inner workings of everything happening. We were just always at the forefront. And then I don't want to say regressing, because it's not. It's moving into a new bucket of funding, right? Of now it's like, how can we stretch $1,000 budget? How can we stretch, I'm working with people that are like, I'm working paycheck to paycheck with you. How can we make this happen? And I'm like, let's center the human of this work, because you're doing something incredible. And at the end of the day, we'll find ways to get paid, right?
Right. Yeah. And Clark, we have a lot of stuff to talk about.
Oh, we have tons of stuff to talk about.
I
Yeah.
thought these two would get together. But so another thing that you mentioned in our conversation before was saying yes to opportunities, but also saying no to opportunities. I think Kelly mentioned that when she first got out, she was saying yes, 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 when she may have been saying no to certain companies or certain opportunities. Or maybe that wasn't you. Maybe it was me thinking in my own head.
Yeah, no, if anything, I think I did a really good job saying no in those first couple of years, but then regretting saying no and second guessing myself and going, oh, maybe I should have said yes. Maybe they, maybe I should have gone for that. Or, I do think you have to, at least for me, and I want to be really clear, like, again, the traditional career path works for certain people. And it's okay if it works for you and it doesn't work for me. It doesn't mean that because I do portfolio that what you're doing is wrong. It's a matter, I think, of understanding yourself and going, what really motivates me and inspires me and makes me feel like I'm accomplished and valued for what I contribute. And so, there is an element of saying no. I mean, for instance, with some of my clients, no, I am not, I'm not a tactician. Don't pay me at my rate and ask me to do something that's really menial. So I think it's a matter of in those moments pointing out and staying true to who you are. For me, it's been, I would actually characterize it. I've been more of a say yes to things for the past, especially the past 5 years. Just because my curiosity gets the best of me and I see potential. So like, saying yes to doing Alice Riot, even though we made clothes and that wasn't the right thing, and learned from that and fell down and it financially pinched doing that. But that's part of the risk you take with a startup, and then moving it into a different direction. And then suddenly saying, oh, this is now starting to hockey stick. This is good. I think it's a part of that discovery. But to me, you have to say yes to things and remove some of that imposter syndrome. And God, that is such an overused phrase these days, but, oh, I can't do that. This is what I do. I used to be really good at that. Things would come my way and I would say, you know what, I'm not the person for that, but let me introduce you to somebody else who can. I've started to more and more say, let me try that. And let me see, you came to me first. So obviously you think I can do something like this. Let's see where it goes, and always have a plan B if it doesn't work out. But I have to step out of my comfort zone to go into the places that I say I want to go. I want to travel. I want to discover art. I want to be an advocate for women artists. I want to be financially successful in doing that. And I want artists to be successful mainly. They get paid first when they work with us. So I'm all about being their advocate and moving them forward first. But I have to be able to say yes to things and not say, I'm not really a developer. So, maybe you should go and talk with someone on Discord or Telegram about this NFT space. No, we're going to figure this out.
Okay. How about you, Clark? What about saying yes to things?
Haha, I'm the complete opposite. I am a people pleaser. I don't think there was a time. So I'm even thinking back, like I just had a conversation with a client, and of course, I'm sure all of you can relate to this. We got everything finalized and sent over, and then I got a revision to the logo. And I was like, of course you did. So, and then instead of saying, you're the only person that's going to notice this, I said, yep, give me a week, I'll get that back to you. So I am the queen of saying yes to things. I've actually been practicing being able to stand in my own space and say yes or thank you, but let's start this a little further. I've been better at my project management, like can't start any clients until June right now, those kinds of things. So, but when I very first started in my career, I mean, Kelly, you're talking about imposter syndrome. I actually started calling it imposter symptom. I truly believe it's because we haven't created enough spaces for these people to feel empowered to do and be and say who they are. And so it's not necessarily an issue on them. It's an issue on it's a symptom of the culture that we've created around these people feeling like they're not enough, because we do need every point of view, every facet. We need everybody to come in and share what they got. Otherwise, how do we talk to folks? But when I still do it now, and when I very first started, it was really hard for me to say no to projects, and especially being a young professional of color, really wanting to center other people of color. I had a lot of like predominantly white male businesses coming in and asking me for my services, which I had been doing prior. And a big chunk of that for me is I felt as though I was using my services for, in my world, the wrong people. I wanted to center some other folks. And so it gave me a chance to really practice being like, thank you so much, but I need to make sure I'm keeping space and work open for the community I'm truly serving. It did, of course, as a business owner, I did have to like look at my ledger and say, okay, what are some ways that I can like still do this work so I can pay my rent and feed my dog and do all the things. But now I've finally been able to, though I'm very self-aware, I want to help everybody, right? We all want to be involved. We want to be the problem solvers. I love being the person that's like, yeah, we fixed that for you. So saying no is a tricky one. It's a practice for me, for sure.
Well, that kind of ties to a question that came in, and that is saying yes and no to work-life balance. So how has your career portfolio helped you with the work-life balance, or has it been challenged work-life balance? For me, I know that my day doesn't stop at 5. It may start at noon after I teach class, or it may start at 4 when I get to know something else. And my kids are always like, why are you always working? I'm like, because I have other things I got to put in these little holes. So tell me a little bit about your work-life balance and what this career path has done for you or helped you do.
If you're okay, Clark, I'll go first on this one, because it's been a journey. So I work all the time. My brain is constantly on. And again, going back to what I'd said at the beginning, having conversations with myself to be able to say, that's okay. That's how I work. I am not someone who thinks that waking up at 2 a.m. and thinking about a strategy is a bad thing. I still need my 8 hours, but I'll get it in there. But I'm married to a firefighter, an EMT, and and we have one child who is now, he's turning 20 in June. And the first half of parenthood, I was traveling 3-4 times a week, and when I was at Berkshire Hathaway, it was even more. I was traveling all the time, and my partner in life was holding down the fort and doing the parenting, and he's fantastic at it, and I'm super grateful. He's also 110% supportive of how I work. He's never, like, I never had a spouse who was like, oh, you're taking a trip again and leaving me with the kid again. I had to do some trade-offs, like discovering my toddler playing Xbox when I came home once from a trip. And, you end up, working that through. But certainly I would say, Jack graduated in 2020, which that was interesting. But I've had the ability to work on my own terms, work when I want to. My husband has, shifts that are more like, 11 to 9 or 9 to 7. And so if I'm still working during those times, I can do that. If we're sitting on a Friday night watching TV and I look over, they're on their phones. If I can check my email, I'm going to do that. It's entirely up to me on when I work and how I work. And I like that. And I feel like I feel more free than if I was, expected to come into a certain cube and be there for a certain number of hours a day. I wouldn't be able to play and break things the way I can doing it this way.
Kelly, I think you put that in like the most perfect way. like I had mentioned, I work like 11 to midnight. I discovered that my brain just never turned off. So once I get the engine going, it's like the object in motion stays in motion until like, like you mentioned, waking up at 2 a.m. with an idea. I got a notebook right next to my bed. It's ready to go. And so trying
Voice
to
memos.
yes, I have to start getting better with those. You both are telling me to get on my voice memo game. I
Voice
gotta
memos.
set that up. I'll start doing some voice memos, but I going in and like clocking in at 8 and leaving at 5 or whatever it looked like, my brain just couldn't get into gear. And what it just started causing me was immense anxiety. I felt as though I needed to make my brain work within that mode, or otherwise I was failing the company or I was failing myself, because I'd leave from work and then just be flooded with ideas and I'd be so exhausted. And I was like, I don't want to give these people any more of my time. And, just trying to work that out. And so I discovered that because once I get started, it's on and it's going, I need to take longer mornings. So a lot of times my mornings look like what most people's evenings might look like. I like to spend my morning watching TV, coloring, doing things just very restful to get my body started very slowly into the day. Because then once I hit this coffee and hit the ground running, I'm sure I'm going to be up very late tonight working on many things. And I'm like, look at me, I was so good.
And it's Friday, and that's okay. It's
And
Friday, and that's okay.
Yes.
I'm gonna work all weekend.
I'm working all
an NFT
weekend
marketplace
too.
to launch. So
Right?
it's like, yeah, that's the thing.
That's the way it works.
I want to point something out to Eva. You remember back when we were at Padilla Spear Beardsley, and for those new on the phone, that's what it used to be called. When Jerry Erickson, our CFO, would walk around and he would hand out these things. They were like reward points. You could save them up. And you would, it was a way to like recognize your coworkers and team, for doing a good job. Mm-hmm. And I would remember he would come in my office because I would get one because I was always 120% billable. I was getting rewarded for essentially like, working myself to the bone and putting everything into the agency.
Yep.
And, I felt valued and appreciated because I was, again,
being conditioned to work too hard.
Yeah. 120% billable. Like, Now, I also will say Padilla was fantastic, especially with Jerry, because of how they shared the financials for the agency and everyone got to learn how to read a P&L. That was like game changing, I think. And so I wanted to call out nothing but love and respect for Padilla because it was really great foundationally for my career. But that's my point in terms of what I'm doing today. I wouldn't be a good agency employee. I need that flexibility and something else that I've learned about myself and the tools of our craft, if you will. I can write a press release in 15 minutes. I don't need 5 days. And if you give me 5 days to do it, I'm going to do it in the last 15 minutes because that's when I'm going to do it. And I'm going to hit the pin and it's going to be great. But some people need 5 days. I need 15 minutes. And I think that just how we are wired and how we do our best work, I think we have to give each other a little bit of grace and space to be able to do it the way we do it.
Yes.
And that, and the system doesn't always necessarily trust that because we want you to take your Enneagram and know what your number is and take your Myers-Briggs and know your strengths finders. Mine have been consistent for 25 plus years. I just did Enneagram for a client. I'm like, of course I'm an 8. I know I'm an 8. I've always been an 8. And I know I'm an ESTJ. And I know that I'm I know what my top 5 are. I also know that harmony is my 34th strength on Strengths Finder. It's the one at the very bottom. I'm perfectly good with conflict. So, it's I think there are means to really know yourself that even the companies give you. Pay attention to how you're wired and really get comfortable with what your truth is. And then you'll figure out if doing portfolio is the right thing for you or if staying on the known path is for you. And hey, cheers on all fronts.
Not to be that person that says to piggyback off that, but to piggyback off that, there's oh my gosh, now I lost my train of thought because I thought it was funny. I always felt as though if I if I felt like I needed to put on a mask or some sort of performance anytime I've walked into a space, that is my ultimate red flag.
Unless it's
And-
the pandemic and you need to wear a mask.
Well, yes, of course. Other than that, a personality mask, being somebody performing for who I think they need at that time. It's happened quite often. And what I found is every time I've said yes and accepted those offers, I ended up draining myself in every way possible.
Right.
It always ends up being the clients that always need that extra step. Or maybe I've even had some that they're asking for the basic of needs, but here's this decade's word of the decade. The burnout was unreal. Like I applaud one of my companions. His name is Marcus Stiles. He is also a creative director and designer. And he had the courage to tell a client, I cannot be creative for you right now, and you're not going to get what you want. And I was like, wow, that is incredible. But the ability to recognize when it's like, yeah, I could do that press release in 15 minutes for you. But what does that whole 5 days leading up to it mean? Are you pulling teeth, agonizing over it? Are you not aligning with the mission? And so for me, that's when I started to recognize that a portfolio career may be a better fit, because then I can step in and step out in my way into some of those situations. And sometimes you don't find out until like 6 months into a project or years into a project, and there you are. But I think that also like played with some of that work-life balance. Is I couldn't turn it off, and people that were asking me to keep it on were burning me out, and that wasn't fair. And who is it for? That's what I always ask at the end of the day.
And I can give you a live example of this and why I think that being in that portfolio space is really good. So with Ellis Riot, we have 3 of us that are team members, and then we have people who, come in and do projects with us. So you can call them subcontractors, but they too are doing portfolio style. We have a current client right now. We're helping them launch an NFT marketplace in a couple of weeks. And boy, that's going to be fun because, just in the art world alone, more than 20 NFT marketplaces have launched since October. And they all sound the same, and they all say the same things, and they're all doing the same things. So we're helping them with the positioning on how do you stand out and do something that's different and filling a gap in the marketplace. Well, we're working with a team. They're mainly developers and people who have come from what I would say more junior roles inside agencies that are now working with these startups. And sometimes, I think that this is the benefit of having gone through that corporate career, is that ability to say, no, you don't need that right now. And to be a good guide, especially for people who aren't initiated in terms of what we do. So when someone is, oh, thank you. My husband just brought me more coffee. My last remaining vice. But, to be able to say to them, no, I am not going to pull a media list for you and show you every single reporter we're going to contact. You may think you need that. You don't need that. This is what you're hiring us to do. So it gives you, there's some self-assurance, I think, that can come from being on your own and having the ability to navigate and help people along who aren't familiar with our space, but to manage those expectations and to very much push back and go, what do you gain from that? And when you start to discover that they want guarantees on media coverage, that's where you go, okay, time out, back up. We need to reset your expectations on what we're doing here. So yeah.
No, I think that's perfectly said, in the sense of managing expectations. Especially, I'm working in a lot of spaces where a majority of these folks are working from the resources that they have and know.
Right.
And even, I just had a call with a client, a wonderful catering company that serves and works with Indigenous populations and food reform. And she called me, and I had just done some branding work with her, and she goes, okay, what do I need next? And she just started rattling off all this stuff. And I was like, let's pump the brakes for a couple of seconds. How are people ordering from you now? And she was like, huh? And I was like, okay, we're gonna talk a little business here. And it may not necessarily be my background, but I've worked with other catering kitchens. I've worked with and absorbed all this information. And so we do get to be those experts in the room that have gotten to touch so many different facets and so many different things that, and of course, I'm not one to say, okay, like this is how you run your food company. And I'll even let her know, I'm like, you're way more knowledgeable there. But from a sales or a marketing or an experiential front where customers are coming in, that front end side of things, she even told me, she's like, I'm clueless. And I said, great, let's work together on becoming experts in this space. So there is such like this wonderful flexibility that I know more about plumbing than I would ever like to admit, but I had a plumbing client and now I know a lot about plumbing. So you never know what all of a sudden, now I could go on Family Feud and maybe be like an expert. So you never know what it could bring you.
Clark's gonna go on Jeopardy.
Yes, I would love to.
She's gonna be on the next Jeopardy.
So I'm going to switch gears here because we got a question that came in. And that's about how many people in your network have careers like you? Like, do you find people who are common, or is there a networking group for people like us, or are we a special little group?
Oh my gosh, Kelly, I'm sure you have a list of resources as well. I found myself in a million different networks just by the sheer fact that we, as humans, we love to niche, right? We love to find a space where we can have that one commonality that we all touch base on. And so I'm a part of a plethora, the Black Chamber of Commerce. I'm a part of the Coven, which is an incredible space that centers, right? I was gonna say, Kelly, we're gonna have to meet at the Coven.
I love the Coven.
The Coven, they center women and non-gender identity conforming individuals. Of course, it's a space, men can come in there too, but they're gonna make sure that everybody feels warm and welcome. And that is just a network of incredible, hungry, primarily freelancers, entrepreneurs, and individuals chasing after their own careers, but they also have like a plethora of folks that are still working in-house somewhere that are looking for contractors or that are always interested in expanding to see if maybe their next step outside of working in-house somewhere is to move into more of that space. I have just some people that love to surround themselves with go-getters. So they're like, I'm more of an introvert and I like being in spaces with extroverts. And I'm like, yes, perfect, come on in. So my network is a lot of hustlers, as I like to call them, folks that are out here just trying to make a way for themselves one way or another. A lot of my network is transitioning right now, especially with, I'm sure a lot of people are feeling after these past couple of years, it's like, whoa, how am I spending this really weird concept of time and like all that kind of stuff. So my network is pretty flexible, but I'm also very fortunate that I still have connections with a lot of those in-house folks because they're the ones that bring me in the, the moolah.
Where the $9 million budget is sitting. It's not with us.
Nope, sorry.
No, I would say more from the Alice Riot side. I've found organizations and groups to join. I'm also very keen on, when we think of what we do again as advocates, media to me isn't as interesting as stakeholder engagement. And I like finding where are the, like, for instance, with the art world, where are the organizations that are advancing women in the art world? So like Art Table, for instance, we're doing their NFT drop at the end of the month. That's to raise proceeds for them. They're the world's largest organization to advance women leaders in the visual arts, meaning museum directors, gallerists, auction houses, etc. So our point of view is if we want to be an organization that helps women artists grow, we need to be in the places that are already working to help women artists grow and be a part of that conversation. So I have found I'm spending more of my time in networks that address that. In terms of other people in my network doing this type of work, yeah, there's a few. There are a few that have their breakout to do their own thing has resulted in them forming their own agencies. There are those that are very much in the same vein of I like to have the flexibility. I tend to have like a trusted group of, and they are women for the most part, who, if I've got a small group that I know if I need a compliance attorney, I call my friend Lisa Beth. If I need someone who's really exceptional at issues management and employee positioning, I call Dawn. I've got Erica, I've got Stacy, I've got Emily, who's like a world-class video producer. So, I think that I tend to see the other people who are out there doing this through the lens of what could we do together. And so that's where I spend most of my time. I've also been, I'm a member of, there's this group called the Female Founder Collective. I'm a member of that. The Impact Guild, that is an organization that I was invited to join last year that put me back closely with people who are inside the media world focused on social impact. And I find that's really meaningful and connects into what I'm trying to do day to day. I think that with the Great Resignation, if that's what it's called, I think everyone is struggling with how do we value and reward employees in different ways, and what are we willing to give up as a company in order to get the best from our people, and maybe that means changing how companies have operated. So I think there's a lot of change and growing pains underway right now.
Okay. So for our last question, I'd like to have each of you kind of share some advice you have for those considering this, people on the call here. And then if anybody's got any questions they want to ask, just either put it in chat or raise your hand. But we'll start with Clark with advice for someone who's thinking about doing this.
It is not as shiny and pretty. I know we all know this, but it's not as shiny and pretty as it seems. A lot of my friends are like, oh, you have it all put together. I go, yeah, because I cry in my closet when you don't see me. There's, it's not for the faint of heart, but even if you're faint of heart, I always say you're equipped with what you need to move forward with. Start with what you know. And then start moving forward from there, because people will start surfacing in ways that you hadn't seen them, and your mindset will shift. And so start with what you know, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. That's the beauty of this, as well as remember who it's for. Those would be kind of like a little 3-parter right there. That's my advice.
The only thing I would add is, I do encourage you to go back and take a look at what it was you wanted to be when you grew up.
Yes.
And get uncomfortable and stand there and look at it, and check yourself in terms of how often have you told yourself, no, I can't do that, or it's too late, or there's other people out there who can do it better than that. I mean, I really think you have to go back and know thyself. And what is it that you're truly about, and how much of your life have you spent telling yourself you can't do something that maybe you really wanted to do? So I think it's not only start with what you know, it's also go back and discover again, are you really doing the things that give you joy, give you energy, that you're really good at? I would start there. And then the how part, you bet there are a million resources out there to help you, find a bookkeeper, find an attorney, get your LLC established. All of those things are possible, and those are the hows, and they're the functional. Spend a little time on your why.
Yes, all the time on your why, and go back to it on those dark days, because having that why is when I'm crying in my closet, where I'm like, I got this, I could do it.
As our old boss at Padilla used to say to me, Eva, Lynn Casey, so what?
I love that phrase. So what?
Mm-hmm.
So what?
So what?
So I think for me, my advice really is, I think that I got this from Kelly at some point, and it was, do the consulting so you get the paycheck coming in, but then find the other things that give you joy, the things you want to do. So I always wanted to teach, so I got that in my quiver. But I also want to be a writer and maybe write for publications. So that's kind of the thing I'm looking at. Like, maybe I want to start like the neighborhood newspaper or whatever. But I also found PRSA as a way for me to volunteer and do things that I didn't know about or couldn't do before. So like putting on an event or figuring out catering or things like that, or a leadership role, which I'm learning. I'm not very good yet, but it's the whole rules of rules of meetings. What's it called? Yeah, I don't know what
Robert's
it's called.
rules.
Yes, like learning those things that I use. But for me, throughout my career, when I've brought people together, that's where I get the real joy of things. Like, oh, you should do this, you should do this, or hey, how about you become create a scholarship that's going to help you solve these problems. It may not be in my wheelhouse, but the ideas come and they can put people together. Like putting Clark and Kelly together, that's like a good idea for me. With that, is there any questions from the group here? We've talked the whole hour. Anything from anybody? I promised Clark I'd do the pause, but it's hard for me to do the pause. Yes,
Yeah.
Dan.
Yeah, if I can jump in quickly. First, Clark and Kelly, thank you so much. This has been really, really fun morning to listen in on what your experiences have been. Can you tell me if when you first started off, if you had an occasion or more than one occasion where you really disappointed or didn't meet a client's expectations, and how did you handle that?
Ooh.
I can go first on
I was
that.
gonna say, Kelly, if you got one, I'm thinking.
Yeah, I mean, it's not perfect, especially here. The thing that I observed, and I'm not going to name names or companies directly on this, is as you watch companies move, and this was prior to the pandemic, when you're watching companies move toward contract workers and increasingly bringing contractors onto their teams. The things that I found that where I was disappointing my client is when I wouldn't conform to the rules that they held for their full-time employees.
Yes.
And being very clear on my boundaries. And there was one particular case where the conversation that started in terms of the quality of the work that I was providing started to peel back those layers and discovered it wasn't about the quality of the work. It was about my presence in the office. And was I there on time, et cetera? And I said, hang on a second, you didn't hire me to be a full-time employee. And if that's what you want, then you should probably go back and revisit, what your expectations are and whatnot. The other thing that I would just caution everyone on this is companies are not fantastic necessarily at, they over-engineer how they bring on contractors.
Yes.
Case in point, I refuse to sign up when a company says, well, we've outsourced our contract management to this company. And so 15% of your invoice is going to pay their bill. And I'm like, no, I will not go through a doll system or anything like that. I will submit my invoices directly to your accounts payable, and that's how we're going to do it. I think that to me has been at least the experience where their expectations aren't necessarily about what I provide in terms of strategy or counsel or positioning or advocacy. It's and also too, I think this has been the biggest pain in my ass as someone who does this, is getting them to stick to their damn terms on paying their invoices. It drives me crazy. Like net 45. This is pretty standard. And just getting them to pay their invoices on a predictable basis. And that maybe is coming a little bit from my discomfort of not being in the system anymore, where again, it was predictable. Every 2 weeks, I got a paycheck. That predictability doesn't come with this type of lifestyle. So I'll stop there.
I was just going to say more on a emotional, personal front. So I worked in social media for a majority of my early career because, I'm a millennial, I'm technically right on the cusp of Gen Z, and they were like, you're young, go do this. And then I realized very quickly that I'm a perfectionist and that landscape is not good for me. So when I had struck out on my own, because it's what I knew, I was doing social media for a lot of small businesses, individuals that were now welcoming on contractors or had budgets to be able to do so. And so Kelly had even mentioned that expectation was really the part. It wasn't necessarily, and I even had these conversations with my clients. I said, am I failing you, or are some of your ideas of what was going to happen coming out of this failing you a little bit? Because I never once said guarantee. I never once said this will happen. I never once said any of these kinds of things. So was there a misstep? And I tried to approach any quote unquote lost opportunity as a learning opportunity. So I say, was there any part of the process where you felt that you weren't supported? Was there any part of this process that there were some holes so that I can be better? Of course, taking with a grain of salt, because everybody's going to have their own management style. But that way, at least for my clients and what I've experienced, is that they can kind of walk the cat back and be like, oh yeah, I was hoping that a social media campaign would sell out my products. And I go, when did I ever say that was going to happen? So fortunately, I've been able to kind of have those tough conversations, but it's really hard, at least for myself, even when I'm sitting home at night, rethinking, recapping my days, to not be like, I was the reason why. I'm a failure. That's not the case. Luckily, and I even tell my clients, this isn't heart surgery. So if something doesn't work, we can go and tweak it and try again. If we need to keep processing, I understand budgets are tight, but that working on trying to almost like detach it from your identity and yourself, which is really hard to do in our work because we are so passionate about it. It takes some practice, but I've been able to sit down with clients and at least have a bit of a conversation. Now, sometimes it's not a good fit. We both decide to terminate the contract, which is always nice to do. Eva, I think you're on mute.
I was just so excited about talking about contracts and
Oh yeah.
cutting, yeah. But for me, I think one of the things that has thrilled me, not thrilled me, but liberated me probably more than anything else, is being able to say, no, I don't think we're a good fit to work together. And no, maybe we shouldn't continue this. Or no, that's not a good idea. Because when I was in the agency side of it, I felt I had to, for those billable hours, I had to please everybody. I had to take out every client. And when I made the decision to leave and go on my own, I'd been told I had to work for a client, and this client made my skin crawl. Like, honestly, goodness, I felt icky. I felt gross. I felt disappointed that this is where my career had gotten me, that I was working for this kind of person. And that's kind of what the trigger was for me to change and make it, because I just couldn't do it anymore. And if someone's not nice to me, I'm just not going to work with them. And there's years I took that, and it liberated me by saying I'm going to be on my own, and I'm going to be responsible for who I work with and who makes me happy. And that's kind of where I have set it down. So with that, we only have a few more minutes. Does anybody else have a question? That was a great question, Dan.
Great question.
Okay. Well, we were going to go till 9:30, but that just is too long for this. So we decided 9:15. And with that, I want to thank you for coming out to the Career Coffee. Our next one will be in this summer, and hopefully it'll be in person. But we also have the Midwest District Conference is going to be in the Twin Cities in September. And I hope that all of you can consider going to that, because there'll be a lot of discussions like this, and we can meet face to face and in person. And thank you very much. And have a great Friday. And don't stay up too late, Clark, working.
I'll try not to, but thank you so much, everybody. Your questions were wonderful. Thank you for listening.
Yes.
Thank you.
Agreed. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelly.
Bye.
Thank you, Clark.
Take care.
Bye.